Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be telling you about the next 5 classics that I would like to read. Now, as you can see behind me, despite it being quite dark back there, I do collect the Penguin English Library editions of classics. These are my absolute favourites. They are designed by Coralie Bickford-Smith, whose illustrations I just completely adore. I think they're stunning. So I have quite a vast collection of these. I'm not that close to completing the entire collection, but it's something I've kind of gradually built up over the past few years. I haven't added to my collection in a little while just because while I was quite good at getting these books, I wasn't so good at actually reading them. I think it's really interesting how we talk about classics. Like, we talk about classics as if they're a genre, which is really silly because classics just mean they are books that have stood the test of time, that perhaps the themes and ideas in them are still relevant to contemporary society in some way, or that they were so impactful at the time period that they still have value as a vehicle through which to learn about that time period. But within that, there are so many genres. There are crime and mystery and thriller classics, there are romance classics, there are books with social commentary, there are books that are lighthearted and funny and some that are serious. There are so many genres within that realm of classics, and I do think it's a bit weird that we talk about classics as if they are a genre. I also find quite weird about people's attitudes towards classics is how, like, judgy people can be. I feel like there are some people out there who, when you're talking about classics and you say you didn't like something, they kind of come back at you with, I think you just didn't get it. Or like, if you get a character's name wrong, they're like, actually. If you misremember the tiniest detail, there are people that like come at you, and that's something that I've definitely found like talking about classics on the internet. It's like when you're talking about them, you are held to a higher standard than you are with contemporary books. There were definitely classics that I've really enjoyed doing deep dives with and analysing. Like, I did a literature degree for a reason, because I enjoy doing that. But sometimes you just don't want to do it. There was a time when, even when I was hauling classics, I was like Googling little bits of information about them so I could like talk about them in an intelligent way, which is so silly because when I'm hauling them, I haven't read them yet. Why would I know anything about them? So when I'm going to be telling you about these next 5 classics that I would like to read, I'm going to be very upfront about what I know about them, or more likely, what little I know about them. So one of the next classics I would like to read is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I've read a little bit of Dickens in the past and have had mixed experiences with how I feel about his writing. All I really know about this one is it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, something about London, something about Paris. And there's no reason I would know any more than that because I haven't read it yet. Next we have The Portrait of a Lady by Henry James. I have read 2 Henry James novels before, The Turn of the Screw and What Maisie Knew, and I had very conflicting feelings on those novels. I read The Turn of the Screw when I was in secondary school, and I think it was a pretty poor choice of a novel to get us to read. I remember thinking the sentences were just way too long and I didn't really get what was going on, but I was probably about 15 when I read it. So I think I was the problem, not the book, because when I was at university in my 3rd year, I then read What Maisie Knew, and I loved that book. I thought it was so good. Again, I literally don't know anything about this book, but I do know a little bit about my experiences with Henry James writing. When I plan the next 5 classics I would like to read, I do like to try and balance it out with some of the chunky books that intimidate me a little bit and some nice smaller ones as well. So the next book I am interested in reading is A Study in Scarlet by Arthur Conan Doyle, and this is actually going to be the one that I read the soonest because it is on my TBR for the Owls Readathon. I read quite a lot of the Sherlock Holmes stories when I was a teenager, but also in recent years. They are something that I've come back to quite often. I find them like just really fun reads. I don't remember which ones exactly I read when I was a teenager because I just kind of plowed through like free ebooks of them, but I don't think I've read this one before. A Study in Scarlet is essentially like the origin story of Sherlock and Watson. It tells the story of how Watson came to develop a working relationship with Sherlock. This one I do know a little bit about. Next up I have Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy. I think the only Hardy that I've read before is Two on the Tower and Tess of the D'Urbervilles. And I have actually read half of this book before, but I started it at quite a turbulent point in my life and I just ended up alongside some other books, just DNFing everything I was reading at that point. So I do know a little bit about what this is about. This follows two people arriving in this kind of typical English town. One is a choir instructor who is bringing some slightly more modern ways to the choir, and also one of the best named characters ever, Fancy Day, who wins the heart of 3 different men. I do really like Thomas Hardy's writing style. I enjoyed both of the books I've read from him before, and I was enjoying this one when I was reading it. This is another one that is slightly shorter than some of the classics on my TBR as well. And finally we have The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. So I have this kind of perception that this novel is something American, one of those books that caused a scandal at the time of its release because it involved like women making their own decisions, I think, and that's basically all I know about it. I think there's some analysis of marriage, possibly, and looking at those themes in a historical context is something that I always really enjoy about classics. Like, the depiction of gender and marriage throughout history is something that I find really fascinating, so I think I'm really going to get along with those aspects of the novel, if the novel even involves those and I haven't made it up. So there we have it, the next 5 classics that I would like to read. Do leave me a comment down below. If you've read any of these books, what do you think I'm going to think of them? If you think I'm going to hate them, like, genuinely tell me, because I find that really interesting. Are you someone that really enjoys reading classics, or are you someone that, like me, has a little bit of trepidation when it comes to reading them? Leave me a comment down below. I'd love to have a chat with you guys. I hope you're doing well, and I will talk to you in my next video.